This is the Smod Father checking in today. Wanted to do a video about one of my all-time favorite decades for stoner rock, heavy psych, desert rock, and really this decade is what made me start Smod. It really is what got this channel rolling. And that is 2000s stoner rock, the decade of the 2000s. Obviously, the groundwork was laid in the 90s with Kyuss and Fu Manchu and Sleep and all those big stoner doom bands in the 90s. There was a lot of them. Orange Goblin, Monster Magnet, tons in the 90s that got the ball rolling. But the 2000s, that momentum just really blew up, and boy, there was countless amazing releases in that decade. And that, you know, me being born in the early 90s, that was really the decade I focused in on around 2009, 2010, 2011. Obviously, the previous decade was still pretty fresh. So that's really what got me into this genre of music and really lit that passion for getting the channel started in the first place. So I wanted to go over today some of my favorite 2000s stoner rock albums. This is not going to cover all of the great 2000s stoner rock releases, of which there's too many to talk about in one video, but this will just cover ones that I own on CD, and I've written some reviews that I'm going to read of these albums and just kind of go over each one a little bit and kind of go in order of when they were released. So we're going to start off the video with this bad boy here, okay? Lowrider, Ode to Io. This one came out in 2000, and it was one of my all-time favorite stoner, desert, mainly, you know, desert and heavy psych type stoner rock albums. This was like pure Kyuss worship. They really honed in on the Kyuss sound on this album. They were kind of Sweden's answer to Kyuss. Okay, they were the first big Kyuss type band to come out of Sweden. A lot of people kind of ripped this album for being a Kyuss clone, but I personally don't mind if the music is done really well, and it sure is on this one. They actually re-released it not long ago. I think around 2020 they did a re-release and with some bonus tracks, but it's got 10 tracks, the original version, which I have here, released on Meteor City Records, an amazing old 2000s stoner label, one of my favorites. Meteor City was a huge influence on me. I'm just going to read my review of this album. One of the finest desert/stoner rock albums of this century, the underground classic from Sweden's Lowrider, Ode to Io. Released in 2000, Ode to Io is Sweden's answer to Kyuss. Many simply wrote this release off as a Kyuss clone, but that's not really fair. These guys have their own swagger going on. The riffs and songwriting are absolutely top-notch here. Vocal work is gritty and suits the desert-soaked grooves very well. And I finally, after years of looking, was able to find this bad boy on CD to add to my collection for a good price. And needless to say, I feel a lot better now. And the collection just isn't the same without it, and neither is yours. So this CD, a great one to kick the video off with. If you've not heard this somehow, if you've been living under a rock, check out Lowrider's 2000 debut, Sweden's classic answer to Kyuss, and one of the best Kyuss type stoner albums, along with Los Nodis's Del Mar. Los Nodis did another very Kyuss-inspired album in 1998, I believe it was. Second CD is this one, another one of my all-time favorites. It's called Astroqueen, Into Submission. This is another band from Sweden. So we got two Swedish bands kicking it off, and there are a lot of Swedish bands in this presentation. Sweden was really kicking rear during the 2000s, let me tell you. Into Submission was released in 2001, and this one really sounds like Truckfighters. If you remember their debut album, Gravity X, a huge influence on me as well. This one reminded me so much of Gravity X. You listen to this and you're like, I've heard this somewhere. I've heard this somewhere before. And then you're like, oh yeah, it was on Gravity X. They did that exact same harmonic, heavy fuzz sound. Very distinct, fuzz-drenched style. And so I'm wondering if Truckfighters were a fan of this band. Of course, Truckfighters were from Europe as well, and from Sweden as well. So definitely possible. Two Swedish bands, and they sound very similar. So I bet you these guys influenced Truckfighters. I'll read my review I wrote on Facebook. It says, "Today I have an album that I feel deserves a lot more attention, and that still holds true. I don't see this album talked about nearly enough. It's such a beautiful, intense stoner album with great desert fuzz. A little band from Sweden named Astroqueen. In terms of cool band names, these guys really hit the spot. It's their debut full-length classic, Into Submission. And Into Submission was released in 2001, and I consider it a precursor to many great Swedish stoner psych bands, including Truckfighters, and Gravity X bears many similarities to this album. This album is extremely high energy, blasting through 11 desert psych rockers. Guitar is melodic and bass is deep and fuzzy. Vocals are clean with a nice edge to them. The sound here just works very well, and it's a great fast-paced stomper to really get you going. The band went on a long hiatus a few years after this. It came out, but in recent years they have reunited, and if we're lucky, we may get another dose of heavy fuzz from the Queen in the near future. Don't let this one pass you by any longer. Blast off with it today." And my favorite tracks on the album, of course, Superhuman God, a very catchy, kind of like if they were to have a single, Superhuman God. You know, if there was a stoner rock single, if we lived in sane times and, you know, stoner rock was charting the top, you know, topping charts and being on radio stations and top 40 stoner, you know, this would be their top 40 song, Superhuman God. Brain Phase Voyage is also awesome, as well as the Sonic Ride. And I Go to Sleep, I'm Gone. So many fantastic, beautiful, intense songs. And of course that artwork, of course, very inspirational, spacey artwork with the spaceship on it. Definitely one you must hear. I don't hear it talked about enough, so check out Astroqueen's Into Submission. The next band, of course, Dead Meadow. All right, Dead Meadow, one of my all-time favorites. And I named the channel from these guys. The inspiration for the Meadow in Stoned Meadow of Doom was from my love of Dead Meadow when I was 20 years old and I started this channel. It was one of my favorite stoner bands at the time. And boy, without this band, I probably never would have thought of the name Stoned Meadow of Doom. So thank you, Dead Meadow. We owe them a huge gratitude here. These are from Washington, D.C., United States. Kind of always found it interesting that they're from Washington, D.C., the capital. I don't hear very many heavy stoner rock type bands coming from the capital, but Washington, D.C. has one very good heavy psych band, very heavy on the psychedelic, very whimsical acoustic stylings, a very beautiful, peaceful band of psych, but they also go heavy and drench you in fuzz as well, especially on their debut album, which I'm holding here, released back in, I believe, 2000. I'll read my review that I wrote of it on Facebook. It says, "Today it's another older classic which made a huge impact on me and my love for heavy, fuzz-drenched psych rock. It's the self-titled debut from Dead Meadow, released back in 2000. Dead Meadow was one of the first stoner rock bands to grab me back around the time I started smawing. In fact, this band is responsible for the channel name. The Meadow in Stoned Meadow of Doom came from the love of this album. I got to thinking about a cool name and combined stoner rock with doom metal and this album to create Stoned Meadow of Doom. Easy enough, right? Well, it's a damn cool name, and so is this album, and it deserves extra props just for that. The album contains a massive wall of fuzzed-out, wasp-soaked heavy psych riffs that is unrelenting. The tone and atmosphere is just perfect, and they have a bit of an indie folk tinge as well, which just adds another layer to their sound. Of course, the opener, Sleepy Silver Door, is probably their defining song, the one they're most famous for. You may have heard that one. It seems to be a big favorite. These guys are still around and making new music, but they've changed quite a bit from this debut, and I have to say I don't like their new stuff nearly as much, but you can't go wrong with their earlier, heavier work. My favorite tracks, Green Sky, Green Lake, Beyond the Fields We Know, which is a very lengthy psych-drenched song, kind of an anthem. I believe it's like 10 minutes long. Beyond the Fields We Know is an epic song. If that doesn't sell you on Dead Meadow, nothing will. And of course, they have Sleepy Silver Door, one of the best, as well as Dragonfly and Lady. Indian Bones is really cool. Really, the whole album is just fantastic. They followed this up with... this album was released in 2003, and it's their third album. But this one is one of my all-time favorite Dead Meadow releases. It's pretty much tied with the debut for me in terms of overall enjoyability. This is a very lengthy album with lots of meat, lots of meat in it. It's about a little over an hour long, and it's really good, especially the opener, I Love You Too, and Babbling Flower, the first two tracks, I Love You Too and Babbling Flower, oh my God. Starts off the album spectacularly. I'll read my review now of Shivering King and Others. Dead Meadow is a pretty significant band for me. They were one of the first modern stoner heavy psych bands I got into back in 2012. This was just a year or so before SMOD was conceived. It says this is their third record and probably my personal favorite, or tied with the self-titled debut, and they are both must-haves for everyone on the SMOD train. They do swirling heavy psych better than just about anyone. They also have some fantastic folk undertones that add nice textures and atmosphere. And the fuzz, oh God, don't forget the fuzz. These guys don't go light on it, especially in these early releases. This is a very underrated band, and this album in particular doesn't get near enough praise. And compared to the self-titled debut, Shivering King and Others is extremely underappreciated. Dead Meadow's Shivering King and Others is, the self-titled debut is kind of famous and well loved, but this one I don't hear, I don't hear it really talked about very much. But some of my favorite tracks: I Love You Too, Babbling Flower, Good Moanin', the self-titled Shivering King track. Shivering King is a very beautiful, hypnotic song. A lot of this album is very hypnotic and gives you goosebumps. It's one of those that invokes a lot of emotion. Of course, Heaven, which is a pretty popular track by them, is also one of the best songs on the album. So this album deserves to be heard by everybody, so check out both the self-titled debut and Shivering King and Others if you haven't heard those. I also have Feathers. Actually, it was the fourth album, which came out a couple years later. And it's got some good tracks on it, although it's a big drop-off in my view, but it's still a pretty great album. Of course, this one, I've got Bongzilla, Gateway. This one was released, I believe, in 2002. The artwork is cool, really cool, very striking. Anyway, Bongzilla, Gateway. By far their most famous release, and probably their best release as well. These guys are from Madison, Wisconsin. They were formed in 1995. I'm sure most of you know Bongzilla, but they have Mike Muleboy on vocals and Jeff Spanky on guitar. So some very interesting nicknames that these guys have. These guys have a good sense of humor. They're like Weed Eater as well, which is also from Madison, Wisconsin. Weed Eater and Bongzilla, they kind of go hand in hand. They kind of had some of the same members. These guys actually played at the SMOD Fest that used to be put on, Stoned Meadow of Doom Fest. So I actually got to see them live. They were really good. Drenched you in heavy. I mean, this album is just massively heavy. One of the heaviest albums in stoner heavy fuzz. I mean, it's just an absolute avalanche of sound. Bongzilla has always been one of my personal favorites of stoner doom, and with a name like Bongzilla, you pretty much know what to expect from these dudes. Just look at that album cover. You know this is some thick, weed-drenched shit. I recently acquired their Defining Statement on CD, finally, and I'm blasting it today. It's their 2002 magnum opus, Gateway. If you have to get one album from these guys, make it this one. Gateway is the band in peak form, effortlessly churning out their unique brand of monstrous stoner doom. You can tell they were really gelling at this point. The title track and 666-pound bong session, which has to be one of the best song names in stoner history. 666-pound or 666-pound bong session. Oh my God. That sense of humor coming in that these guys have is awesome. So it's got 8 tracks, of course. Green Thumb, Stone a Pig, all really great tracks. Of course, my favorites being the self-titled track Gateway and 666 Bong Session. Yeah, this is some great stuff. Of course, I also love their follow-up album, Amerijuanakin. I don't have that on CD. I had the chance to get it, and I never got around to buying it, so I'll have to track that one down and buy it again, and you know, actually add it to my collection, because that's a great album as well. Maybe not quite as epic as Gateway, but I also have Stash, their first album, which actually was released in 1999. I have that one as well. I got this band, Color Haze. I've got a couple CDs from them, and they were a big influence on the channel as well. They were one of the first bands that I really fell in love with in my early 20s when I was starting Smod. That summer of 2013, I was really getting into this band a lot. And this is their double album epic, Los Sounds de Krauts. I believe released in 2003. Color Haze, the German band formed by the very talented singer and guitarist Stefan Koglik. I just wanted to talk about my favorite, this is probably my favorite Color Haze album. Absolutely beautiful album. They really go on a lot of heavy workouts on there, a lot of lengthy, 15 to 20 minute tracks on this album that they really stretch it, and it gives them a chance to have the psychedelic guitar and the jamming of the guitar. Of course, you like that. If you like the riff, you like when they have those lengthy instrumental passages where the guitar really gets to shine. And they have it a lot compared to their other albums. This one really has it a lot more. It's a very heavy jam-oriented album. Very beautiful album. I'll read my review that I wrote of it. Color Haze is a band everyone in this group should be familiar with. One of the godfathers of stoner rock, and certainly of the European stoner psych scene. These guys have been together since the early 90s and continue to release solid material to this day. Their leader, Stefan Koglik, is a master of the psych riff. He also formed a fantastic record label called Electro Hash Records, and many of the earliest Smod uploads are from that record label. So yes, his record label was very influential to me. And I used that record label as a stepping stone for building the audience here on Stoned Meadow of Doom, building the early uploads from that record label. They weren't being promoted properly on the internet, so I decided to do it because I fell in love with a lot of the releases from this record label. Now I'm proud to say that I've helped acquaint many to these guys and their label on YouTube. Today I'm jamming perhaps their crowning achievement, the 2003 double album Los Sounds de Krauts. And those that haven't experienced this beauty are really missing out. It's a sprawling heavy psych jam fest with an hour and a half of music. The band had perfected their craft by this point, and it really shows. This is just Color Haze in their absolute prime. Best tracks here are where they really stretch out and do what they do best. Some of their best moments happen on these lengthy instrumental journeys. And probably my favorite track on the album, Weltra Mantra. German, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. But it's a 17-minute magnum opus that you just must hear. Oh God, the guitar playing on that song in particular is just absolutely gorgeous. Of course, there's other great songs as well. A lot of sublime mastery on this album. Other great songs, of course, Sundazed, very, very beautiful. A great title for that song, Sundazed. It always evoked that feeling. Sums up this kind of music for me. A nice blistering sun, beautiful sunny summer day, and just being soaked in the rays of the sun, the feeling you get when you're soaked in sun rays. That's what songs like that, when they start getting that beautiful psychedelic guitar jam and the harmony and all that stuff, it really gives you goosebumps and makes you think of bright sunny rays on your face, a nice fresh summer day. And Overriding, which is another really long track, about a 20-minute long track, a very epic song. So this album, hour and a half. So I mean, you got to really be prepared to sit down and give it some time. It's not one of those easy-going 35 or 40-minute albums. You got to really sit down and let it chew. Color Haze, of course, would release a couple more really great albums in the 2000s. Temple in 2006 is another one of their best releases. They really peaked as a band in the 2000s. So if you're going to listen to any era of Color Haze, check out their 2000s releases because those are definitely Color Haze at their best. And Temple's one that I need to get on CD, but I have not been able to track it down quite yet. So that's on my list. Of course, I wanted to talk about Clutch's Blast Tyrant. Okay, Clutch has kind of lost their stoner psych roots that they used to have. This was really the last album they made that really kind of sounded like stoner psych rock. Their self-titled CD from 1995 is very much a spacey psych stoner rock album. And this one is similar. It's got a lot of that fuzzy psych-drenched riffing in it as well, but it's a little more hard rock oriented. It was released in 2004. I've always loved the title Blast Tyrant. It's just the perfect name for this unrelenting hard rocker. And if you haven't gotten into Clutch, this is a great place to start. Blast Tyrant is about the best candidate for an entry-level Clutch album. The album sees the band in their prime churning out hit after hit with hard-driving rhythm and catchy sing-along lyrics. They really cranked the energy and songwriting up a notch here. For fans of their earlier, more psychedelic offerings, fret not. They still managed to mix in plenty of groove and psych with a dose of the blues for good measure. This blues sound would become a staple on future releases, but just started to poke through here on a few tracks, which is like Ghost. Ghost is a really great song that kind of has, and The Regulator being a very famous, Ghost and The Regulator, a couple kind of acoustic bluesy songs. Of course, they would really abandon the psych stoner type stuff and kind of go more towards just blues and hard rock on the releases after this. I have Robot Hive Exodus, which came out the year after this in 2005, so another one of their better albums as well. So two of their best albums came out back to back. So Clutch was firing on all cylinders in the mid-2000s. I really haven't liked Clutch nearly as much in the last 10 years. Their last 10 years of releases, I just haven't really enjoyed them very much, but their 90s and 2000s stuff, oh yeah, really great stuff. Stoner rock fans should know Clutch. Favorite tracks include Prophets of Doom, great song. Cypress Grove, promoter of earthbound causes. Lots of groove on these songs. And this album just flows and just hits you. It's very intense and hits you and just doesn't even give you a chance to breathe, but they mix in a couple of nice slower songs with some acoustic styles in it, like The Regulator. Of course, I've got another United States band. Of course, Clutch was from Maryland. This is Brant Bjork and the Bros, Saved by Magic. Really neat artwork here. This was the first album under his Brant Bjork and the Bros moniker, released in 2005, of course from California. It's a double album, 2 discs, and this album I actually haven't even taken it out of the wrapper yet. I don't know if you can tell. Still in wrapper, new condition here. Because I bought 2 copies of it. I was going to give one to an ex-girlfriend, but never got around to doing that. So I have 2 copies of it. This one was always kind of hard to get a hold of, but I found somebody selling it for a really good deal on eBay, and so I bought a couple of them. Double album, though, it's really great stuff. Probably the best 2000s Brant Bjork album. It's got some absolutely fantastic albums. Moda, Make the Pony Trot, Inside of You, Freak Levels. 19 tracks across 2 discs. Definitely, other than Jalamanta, it's one of his best albums, definitely. So lots to chew on, lots of lengthy, it's over, probably an hour and a half of music. I got this Truckfighters album, of course, Gravity X, of course, the very familiar Spaceman. I'm sure you've all seen him before somewhere. Don't know where, though. He looks familiar. Yeah, this was really the album that made me start Smod. I mean, when I got into this album in the summer of 2013, I knew I had to start a stoner rock channel at that time because I was just in love. I mean, I just could not get this style of music out of my head. I mean, it just haunted me. It was just in a good way, you know. This was easily the album that spawned my obsession with modern stoner sound. It was the spring of 2013 when I heard this dandy. And that was exactly when the Smod channel started as well. There's just something about this one that really grabbed me and pulled me into the whole atmosphere of fuzzy desert psych. I was instantly hooked. It may have been the album art that really grabbed me first. It has such a cool retro space design, which really captures what this genre is all about. And I would put Gravity X as one of my favorite albums of all time, and its impact is clear. If you're a fan of Smod and didn't know where the Spaceman avatar was from, look no further. Of course, it's got a very famous opener, Desert Cruiser. Very great opening track. Is a great track. Momentum is one of my favorite Truckfighter songs. I remember really falling in love with that song, how it builds and builds and builds and has this dun 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 dun. Just the intensity of that build up. I remember Momentum really caught me. Super Funk is really cool. Guido Guido. Guido Guido was amazing. I really loved Guido Guido. Cool song name as well. And Manhattan Project was another one of my favorite songs from the album. And of course, Altered State, the closing track, a nice instrumental journey. Not very many instrumental songs on this album. It closes with a beautiful instrumental, Altered State. 2006, we had this album, Witches, self-titled, which was the first album I uploaded on this channel in 2014. The very first album I put up. So that's kind of cool. April 7th, 2014. And there, I don't remember what the first one I put up on the other Stoned Meadow of Doom channel. I had one before this in 2013 that got terminated about a year later in early 2014. I don't remember what the first album was that I put up on my very first Stoned Meadow of Doom channel, but this is the current channel that you're watching. This was the first upload many moons ago, about 10 years ago. And this is, of course, the band that Dinosaur Jr. leader Jay Macis formed. He actually plays drums on this project, I believe, instead of the guitar like he does in Dinosaur Jr. But this had their very famous track Seer on it, as well as Black Saint and Changing. Those three songs in particular are really, really fantastic. This was released on TP Records, which was another one of those labels that really influenced me. TP was amazing. Countless fantastic releases in the stoner rock genre. Here's Graveyard. Okay, another Swedish band, but this is their debut album from 2007, self-titled. It's my favorite Graveyard album. I'll read my review of it. Today I'm rocking the 2007 self-titled debut from Graveyard. It's what's in my stereo, and it's one of my favorite retro stoner albums. They're widely regarded as one of the best bands in the modern retro stoner rock scene. They are certainly one of Sweden's finest, of course, along with Witchcraft. A throwback to the 70s with blazing psychedelic guitars and smooth, soulful vocals. The songwriting here is top-notch. The production is amazing. It effortlessly captures the retro throwback feel. It has the perfect raw energy that you look for in albums like this. If you want the 70s atmosphere in the modern age, get this and Witchcraft's debut. Again, these are not exactly super underground, so I'm sure most of you know these albums, but this is Earthless. Rhythms from a Cosmic Sky. Released in 2007, also on TP Records. This is a band from San Diego, California, another American band. This album is 3 tracks. The first 2 are huge, huge instrumental, lengthy 15-minute tracks. Godspeed, the opener, and Sonic Prayer, and it has a third song, Cherry Red, where they go fast-paced and they have vocal work on it, actually a singing on that song, but most of Earthless is instrumental, and it's got that wonderful jamming workout, lengthy jam workouts. So, and beautiful guitar, very beautiful. Love the artwork as well. Casa Sui, Summer Sessions. I actually was sent these summer sessions by the band. They were very nice to send these to me because I had promoted their band and helped their label. I have all 3 summer sessions, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. Released around 2008 and 2009, so the very end of the decade. So I thought I would include them on this 2000s Stoner Psych video. Another instrumental type of music here. Lots of lengthy instrumental jams. Volume 1 is probably the best one of the bunch. So summer sessions, if you haven't heard of Kissui, check them out. The summer sessions are a great place to start on that, especially during the summer. So I can't wait for the summer so I can jam Kissui. The opening track, Visions of Summer, 25 minutes long. Red Sun in June, 7 minutes long. I mean, every track is 7+ minutes. You got 4 tracks. Lots of saxophone therapy if you're into the jazzy. They have a lot of saxophone, beautiful saxophone playing on these. Great instrumental band, just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I'll read my little review to wrap the video up. This Danish Psych Masters Kissui released the summer sessions in 2008. This is the first in a 3-part series of summer sessions, and it's probably the best one. For those not in the know, Kissui specialize in long, improvised, heavy psych acid jams, entirely instrumental and simply breathtaking. These guys are perhaps the best instrumental band out there. I think Summer Sessions Volume 1 is their best work, along with Euphoriatide. The album opens with a 24-minute epic called Visions of Summer. Yes, 24 minutes. It's just a stunning record. You really can't afford to be without these guys. So I'm going to end this video before it gets too long. I'm sorry, it's a very long-winded video. I didn't expect it to take this long. Hopefully it was interesting and maybe you found some releases that you didn't know. Thank you very much for watching, and if you watched this whole thing, congratulations to you. I will talk to you guys later. Doom on, and thanks for watching.